pfSQL also has a CLI for submitting and maintaining your pfSQL queries. We're going to start by installing it using brew here on my Mac. I've also included a link to the documentation in the description of the video. But I will do a brew install, StreamNative pfSQL CLI. And mine's already installed, so it should go pretty quickly. In fact, it doesn't need to do anything at all. I could do a reinstall, but you'll see that it has to download all the dependencies. Once that's installed, we should be able to just do pfSQL, and a help menu will come up. We're going to go ahead and look at our first query that we're going to submit to our StreamNative hosted cluster. So here we have my full pfSQL command that I'm going to use to submit my pfSQL query to my StreamNative hosted Pulsar cluster. Blue items are the commands and the flags, and the red are the values for the flags. But the value for the query I've made in orange so it stands out a little bit more as we go through and discuss these. The B flag is the URL that I'm going to submit to. Then we have the OAuth provider and the OAuth parameters, where the OAuth parameters includes the credentials URL, which is my downloaded OAuth 2 JSON key. Then our main command is query run. So you have query and then various items. And in this case, we're using run with the flag of query. And then here's my query that I'm going to submit. You can look at the differences between the one I have here up on the screen versus when you submit it through the UI. So you'll need some extra backslashes inside of your string next to your backticks. And then we also submit to a specific tenant and namespace using properties, which is the P flag. So it's a little bit different than maybe some other CLI tools that you've used. And then I'm also going to submit with a name and description, just like we had done with the UI. With pfSQL CLI installed, and we now have our pfSQL command complete, let me go ahead and execute that in terminal. And we'll see that the success result gets returned. So our query has now been submitted. We can either get the query ID here, or if you need to list the queries that are currently run in a tenant and namespace, we can use query list, specifying the tenant and namespace as properties. And executing this in terminal, we'll get one result returned, and that is the query that we just submitted, which name is CLI query. Go ahead and copy that query ID. And by default, we're going to be reading from the beginning of our input topic, and I already have some data in there. Now that we have the query ID, I can use the preview functionality along with that query ID. So let me go ahead and paste that here into terminal, and we'll start to see some of our results. Here we have the result of Greg of age 26. Hitting enter, I can see John, Greg, John, and then that's all we have. I'm not going to go into the details of this or execute them, but there's also a status command to check the status of your query where you pass in the query ID. There's also the stats command to provide some stats on your query. And finally, there's a delete command, which will allow us to delete the query. So let's execute that and go ahead and delete the query that we had just created and previewed. Back in terminal, executing the delete command, it will delete our query. And then finally executing the list command, specifying our tenant and namespace, we will see that the pfSQL query is now been deleted.